I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey, and this is game 3 of round 1 of the European Team Carcassonne Online Championships 2021, Latvia against France. I'm playing the French player with a screen name Viv. I won the first game, he won the second game. Now this is the decider of the best of 3. I know the championship is almost over and we're still reviewing round 1. It just was an interesting game that deserves attention, and we'll get to other stuff in due course. As you see, I start with an advantage over here as the first player with the yellow meeple, so I get to score 4 easy points at the start. This is an advantage pretty much equivalent to what the white pieces have in chess. Now, of course, I do not place the road over here and try to attack this road. First of all, it is not worth enough points, and second, this attacking square is too vulnerable. It can just easily be blocked off with something like this. So, of course, I start my new road instead. And here comes our first pause the video moment. So, the French player has this city cap over here. What's the best move? What should the player with the red meeples do? Well, if you think that, well, what's the problem? I just finish my own city. That's a standard move. Well, no, there is something much better. So the French player can drop the city cap next to my own city, pointing it to the left, and either dropping a field meeple or placing a meeple on the city. Both work just fine. Well, what's the problem with finishing your own city? It's not a bad move necessarily, it's just a bit unambitious, because for 2 reasons. In the opening stages of the game, you want to have 2 cities open when you have enough meeples, because there are many more tiles in Carcassonne with which you can continue a city than those tiles with which you can start a city, such as the tube-shaped extender. Excellent for continuing a city that's already open. Not very good for starting cities. And the same goes for the triangle-shaped cities. And also, if Viv were to put over here as suggested, then he makes it harder for me to complete my own city. Then this city cap would be facing outwards, and it would be not advantageous for me to try to grab the city. So this would already be putting pressure on my own city. But now, by making this peaceful move, the play with the red meeples gives me enough time to disentangle. So yeah, he just finishes his city over here. And this is the move that made me very happy during the game. So now I can do this, and that probably would have been the best move. I think I went for the second best move over here. It could be a little bit overly ambitious because this triangle city, you know, it's not the most lucrative city ever. It just even doesn't look particularly juicy, but it's definitely advantageous to try and score for both the road segment and the city segment of a tile, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Excellent tile for Viv, starting a new city. Now I finish my road and drop a field meeple, of course, because this is an excellent field. It has several squares to build new cities on, and there's already 3 points, and this city will get completed probably, this city will get completed probably, and you know, there could be 3 cities at least in the near future. Now the French player has the option of placing the curve next to my city and harassing my meeple, but instead he just chooses to continue a road, which is definitely fine. Now we get a monastery which we place next to our own feature and expand the field even further, adding 2 more squares where we can build new cities on. And now from the French player comes the move that will define our strategies for the rest of the game. Well, what should you do if you're the French player? Of course, start breaking my city. And this move is really unpleasant. So even though the French player is adding 1 point to my feature, the chances of completing this city are now not particularly high, because one of the tiles that fit in this hole is already out, right over here. And this spot is now vulnerable, and in general, I should not be expecting to get back this meeple very soon. A further downside is that because the city is unlikely to be completed, this farmer will score fewer points. So we need to be prepared to play at a meeple disadvantage. So that said, what do you do if you're me with this monastery over here? There are really two good options, but really only one good option. So if you look at monastery spots, this kind of screams at you, right? It's 5 points, and then you get to control your opponent's meeple. But actually, I think this is not the best move. And here's why. So we should be thinking that we're at a meeple disadvantage. And if we are placing a monastery over here, then we would be creating another field with two cities in it and loads of new squares to build, and the French player could start a counter field there, and this field meeple will become completely irrelevant. So generally, when you are at a meeple disadvantage, it's better not to spread yourself thin. So I decide to cluster my monasteries, get the same 5 points, expand my field further, create a juicy monastery spot over here, and pre-build a 3-point road. The French player finishes his city, starts a new one, and creates a blocking platform over here. So what do? Do we protect it? Do we place the curve like this? The answer is no. Even if we protect this square, the city is still unlikely to be completed. And also, by protecting this square, we're slightly constricting this square. So what we got to do is we got to let reds just block this meeple all they want, and instead just grab 4 points over here, further expanding the field. And have a look what's happening now. So the French player now has two options. He can either continue his road on the left, or he can block. And he has to block, it's a vulnerable spot. You get a chance to trap 2 meeples. It's quite enticing. And that, in fact, is, I think, the correct move. But this gives me time to finish my city and even to re-attack the French player's road and add a city to my field. So all kinds of benefits from this tile. Just because the French player had to spend a move on blocking. So even though this looks pretty unpleasant for me, I still get some compensation for my blocked meeples already immediately. And now comes a move where I think the player with the red meeples got a little bit overzealous with the blocking, placing over here. So, of course, you want to block this spot eventually, but I think a better move was using this tile to continue his city on the left. Well, it's hard to explain why, but it very often happens that if you use this triangle tile, I've seen this in other games as well, for blocking while starting a new city, this city sometimes gets into trouble as well, because if you think about it, the French player wants to put something like this over here, right? But then this would create an attack point on his city, and let's say if he places this over here, I grab a city cap on top, and then this red meeple can get into trouble. Instead, I think it was better to continue the French player's city, well, if you're the French player, obviously, and wait for a better tile. Now we get this tile over here. And maybe your idea is to make a move something like this. Looks not bad. You start a new city, you add a point to your city, then you make an indirect defense of the blocking square over here, so you make it harder to block. But this would be this. I meant to say this or that, and I kind of conflated them and mumbled them together. I gotta speak a little bit slower. Anyway, this would have been a heavy strategic mistake, because this square is still vulnerable, and I cannot be hoping to complete this city before this critical square is protected. So we want to make sure that our city remains open so that we can build a ruin and possibly score some 8 or 9 points and make this block meeple justifiable. So we keep this spot open, and instead we drop the city splitter where it belongs, in our own field. Now the French player continues on the blocking, and that's the right thing to do. Also a move that limits the field, definitely unpleasant. Well, we get to save one of these meeples, sort of, kind of. There were, right before this move, 3 tiles that fit over here in this hole, but the French player drew one of them, so he just continues to block, which possibly could be a bit excessive, but it kind of makes sense. And if I were the French player, I would meeple this, because given my meeple disadvantage and given the precarious situation with my monasteries, like I need now the same tile over here and over here, I might just recognize that I will not be able to save both monasteries and simply grab this city cap. So it's best for the French player to actually meeple this so that these 4 points, these easy 4 points, do not end up belonging to me. But I do not do that. This meeple is in a precarious position and we want to get him out as soon as possible. And actually I would love to play something like this, perhaps, you know, because a triangle would fit here perfectly and my monasteries would get built up more easily. But in some scenarios this meeple gets blocked, and that would be really unpleasant. So it's okay to have your meeples trapped if they give you points, but having a meeple trap with 1 point would be a major disadvantage for me. So I decide to just simply get my meeple back, add a point, add a city to my field, add 4 points to my scoreboard. There's this nice monastery spot over here with 4 monasteries still remaining. Well, the downside is there is now an attacking platform for Viv if he wants to take over the field, but not with this tile. Instead, he goes for the block, as he should. And we don't get a tile to defend, but that's the stuff that I told you earlier. We get a chance to do what the French player did to me. You see these nicely symmetrical ruins. We get to break his city. And that's why I mentioned before that these triangles very often get into trouble if you kind of try to block with tempo using them. So this move would have been much better if that were the city cap rather than a triangle. And now comes the mistake that cost the French player the game. Well, actually, you have this monastery tile if you're red. So what would you do with it? There are 2 decent moves that you can think about. So the first thing to recognize that they're not particularly good monastery spots. Well, you could place it over here on the left. That would be actually not bad. You could just use it as a blocking tile, you know, because there are scenarios, some scenarios how this city gets completed. We just want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And there's a move that I like the best, is placing the the monastery above my field and attacking my field from above like this. So this makes sure that this square now becomes vulnerable as well, and with a reasonably lucky run out, Viv can now block my monastery as well and join my field from the left. But instead, the French player does this. Well, it doesn't look like a bad move, right? Well, you get a 6-point monastery. When is that ever a mistake? Well, now in this game, because first of all, this is not 6 points. This is effectively 4 points, because by placing this monastery over here, the red is adding 2 points to yellow automatically. Second, now you're in a situation where the yellow meeple is controlling the red meeple, and here's why. Because the yellow meeple is not getting out very soon, yellow has no incentive to build up the shared monastery squares over here and over here. So if red wants his meeple back, he is the one that would have to put tiles over here, most likely. But most importantly, this move fixes my field problems. Now there are no attacking squares for the field, and I'm perfectly happy with 9 points. I can just keep them until the end of the game. I'm already 11 points ahead on the scoreboard. We have kind of both vulnerable cities over here, and the only difference is just I have, you know, one more blocked monastery meeple. It's really not that bad. And especially after this fantastic tile that we managed to draw, we managed to sort of kind of save this square. So there's a 75% chance of me drawing this tile that fits there. And that would be a high impact tile because that would give me 7 points for the city. Well, 4 points for the city plus 3 points for the field, because this little city piece is in my field, and this would give me a meeple back. And now, again, if you are the French player with red, you need to recognize that you're kind of behind now, and you have to start grabbing points yourself. One way to do this would be to take 2 points over here, up top, and adding 2 more points indirectly to your ruin. But instead, the French player goes all out on blocking and places this tile over here, adding 2 further points to my feature, thus pretty much making it justifiable. You know, I have a ruin worth already 6 points, and another reason why this move was premature is that this city was not close to being completed. I was still 2 tiles away at least, but actually probably 3 tiles away if I wanted to complete the city. So the French player still had time to use either road tiles for blocking or city tiles for attacking. So finally we get to share the roads, and the French player finally completes the block, but again, using a valuable tile to do so. And now we even create a threat of completing our city, which is absolutely fantastic. So Reds, of course, now actually really needs to block. And now there's a 75% chance of me drawing a tile that fits over here. Because there's 2 of those remaining. But now we get to block finally for once, because there's nothing that fits here anymore. So this red meeple is trapped as well. A good tile for the French players, completing a city and starting a new one. And now comes another interesting move in the position. So I have only 2 meeples, but nevertheless, I drop another field meeple, and here's why. I do not want the French player to be able to take this field, or possibly now the French player would need to fight for it and spend at least 4 more tiles on, you know, connecting in different ways to this field and trying to win it outright. But by being the first on the field, I'm making sure that it is difficult for the red player to take it over. And also we are starting a block over here. So it was actually very important to take this field. So much so that I would say that the same move without a field meeple would have even been a mistake. Now you may be thinking that, you know, I'm only with 1 meeple, how for half the game actually, assuming that I'm not getting any of those tiles that fit in these holes. But if you think about it, well, what do I really need the meeples for? If I get a crossroads, I can score some quick points. If I get a road tile, I can use them for blocking. If I get city caps, I can drop them without a meeple on my fields, which is the advantage of controlling a field, because you can actually extract value from city caps without risking a meeple. So I really don't need more than one meeple for the rest of the game. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that, but monasteries are also out as well. So like, well, almost out. There's only one left now, which was another consideration. And now Viv draws a very nice monastery for 7 points, but also adds 3 points from my field and kind of makes it really, really nice and neat. So I'm controlling 18 field points, which is amazing. So we just build up the city. Now it's time for the French player to risk. They try to, well, build up the monastery, and of course they want to complete this city and drop a field meeple on the next move, which is why we're not gonna let them do that. Now comes a slightly difficult decision over here with this divider. So I end up just dropping it on my field. Even though I'm adding a point to my opponent's monastery, I'm adding a point to my monastery as well, and creating potentially 2 new cities on my own field without actually creating any new entry point for the field. Well, Viv immediately draws a good tile that would fit me very well over here, and instead just grabs 4 quick points, but that's okay because it's just really 1 point because this field is still under my control. Now, this tile is a bit difficult to play with. So there are several candidate moves. I could go over here just building my city, but I think there is something more aggressive. I missed this move. Well, actually, I consider this move sort of trying to attack this monastery and also close off any potential obscure connections through a curve to my field. It's actually still possible if my opponent draws, let's say, a triangle with a road over here and then another curve over here. So this kind of makes sure that these shenanigans don't happen. But on the other hand, it creates another connection spot through a triangle like this, and the only remaining city cap like this. Even though it's a low probability connection, I just wanted to keep it simple. This was probably the best move actually, because, you know, there's no, it's rare that you can get 100% so early in the game. So I just start attacking this city, which I think is also fine, and it forces my opponent to now start saving this meeple. And now we're facing a decision. We draw an excellent tile, so we could be taking 3 points over here and limiting this ruin over here, and also limiting field connections. But in this situation is not the priority. We really want to protect my field, because again, my opponent is threatening to draw a city cap and drop a field meeple on the next move. It's something that we do not want to happen. So we forego the 3 points, and now we just start blocking. There are already only 2 tiles that fit over here, the same tiles that I need for this monastery, but I can also continue my block a little bit later. So this is an expensive block because I already said no to 3 points, added a point to my opponent's city, so it's already cost me 4 points. Now Viv gets to grab this 3-point road instead of a 2-point road, which he would grab otherwise. So it's already 5 points that this block cost me. Now we just end up adding 1 more city to our field. Not a perfect move because there's a chance of a field connection, but you know, there's not much else that you can do with this tile really. And now Viv gets another 3 points, again, which would not have been possible had I placed this tile over here. So what? The block ends up costing me 9 points actually, which is a lot if you think about it, but it's still more than the 16 points that my opponent would have scored if he finished this city below. And if he managed to connect to my field. So even though I sacrificed a lot of points, this block over here was still worth it. Now we're continuing the block. My opponent now, of course, tries to continue the block over here, and now we draw this massive piece of luck, which, of course, I was happy to do during the game, but probably this game and this video would have been more instructive had I not gotten lucky over here. Because even if I do not get to complete this city, even if I remain with 1 point until the end of the game, all my meeples are scoring pretty well. They are put to good use. And yeah, I could just play with 1 meeple until the end of the game over here, but this is not what happened. We just get to serendipitously complete this city and probably just seal the game 16 tiles before the end. Now with this move also we get to block 3 meeples of our opponent at the same time. It's actually interesting how the tables have turned. It's something that happens in positions with a meeple disadvantage very often, is that your opponent keeps blocking, and at some point it just turns around and now I'm the one that has more meeples. Because of course Viv now needs to get points and try to attack this 15, potentially 8-point field over here. Not with this tile though. And now we make a move with the sole intention to just dry out the game. So the purpose of that move is to block this meeple because there are no city caps left. And we are okay with starting a city in a precarious position because the main point is that we need to make sure that Viv is not able to grab this small city over here. And now the remaining tiles don't give us much. By the way, interestingly, we actually get a little bit unlucky over here because our opponent draws both tiles, these ones, that would fit in these holes. So this we didn't even max out on the luck, and in fact, like, we had a 75% chance and we didn't get it. So but we do get to block the field connection, and now the score will be quite unpleasant. So the last moves do not matter that much. We just get to score some quick points, add a further city to one of my fields. And even grab a 6-point road over here. Oh yeah, this is the moment where Viv grabs the tile that I needed, and we just get to add a point to our city. Yeah, so as the points are counted, there's something interesting about this game. One of the reasons I wanted to share it is that to an observer who sort of did not see the game from the start, if you start watching it from the middle somewhere, it seems that yellow is in a very bad position because they have so few meeples and so many blocked meeples. But blocked meeples also score points. And it's possible that our opponent was at some point overzealous with the blocking, and we just ended up taking advantage of that with a little bit of luck at the end, but again, that wasn't necessary. So the final score is plus 47, as you can see, by virtue of this gigantic city over here. But, well, you know, 4 points from this city was gifted to me by my opponent, whilst we're also engaged in blocking. we did so only in the situations of strategic importance, like over here, so that our opponent does not get to connect to our field. And there's really only one lesson to be taken from this game is don't be afraid of blocked meeples if they score points. Let me know if I missed anything interesting in this game. Also, I have a couple of puzzles in the pipeline, so do subscribe if you're interested in competitive Carcassonne content, and like this video. If you like this video, it helps with the algorithm a lot. It really does. I would greatly appreciate this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.